Good morning, students. In last class we have done about stoichiometric calculations. So today I will continue about the stoichiometric calculations. Now suppose this is a reaction A plus twice B, it gives AB2. So this is a chemical reaction A plus twice B, it gives AB2. The reaction is already balanced. Since the reaction is balanced, here you have seen 1 mole A is react with 2 moles B. So like this, since the reaction is balanced, so 1 mole A reacts with 2 moles B. But suppose in question it is given 1 mole A is reacted 1 mole B for this reaction. Suppose in question it is given like this, 1 mole A reacts with 1 mole B to produce AB2. Since in the balanced chemical reaction 1 mole always requires 2 moles, but here 1 mole reacts with 1 mole. That means if you see like this way, 2 moles of B requires 1 mole A. So 1 mole of B requires how much? It will requires half mole according to the balance equation, because as you have got 2 moles B requires 1 mole, so 1 mole B requires half mole, but in question it is given 1 mole. That means this reactant is given in excess. Actually, although 1 mole A is present in your reaction, but all the 1 mole do not involve in reaction. Actually, only half mole of A participate in your chemical reaction. That means this reactant is given in excess amount. That's why this reactant is called excess reactant. And this is given in limited amount. That's why this is said to be limiting reactant. This is said to be limiting reactant. To have you got it, what is limiting reagent, what is excess reagent? Limiting reactant means, the definition if you want to write, the reactant which is completely consumed in chemical reaction are called limiting reactant. The reactant which is completely consumed in the chemical reactions are called limiting reactant, and the reactant which is present in excess amount, that is called excess reactant. I repeat again, the reactant which is completely consumed in chemical reaction, that is called limiting reactant, and the reactant which is given in excess amount, that is called excess reactant. Now in this question, suppose 1 mole A reacted 1 mole B, then how much mole of AB2 will form? As you have already got, to find out the moles of AB2, you can calculate from the reactant A also, you can calculate it from the reactant B also, because both the amounts are given, 1 mole A, 1 mole B. But when you determine the amount of AB2, when you determine the mole of AB2, always you have to determine from the limiting reactant. If you calculate the amount of AB2 from excess reactant, then your calculation will be wrong. That means when you calculate the amount of product always you have to calculate from the limiting reactant. That is why in question, if the amount of both the reactants are given, A reactant amount is given, B reactant amount is given, then first time you have to find out who is limiting, who is excess. First time you have to find out that. After find out the limiting reactant, then you have to do the calculation for the amount of product only from the limiting reactant, not from the excess reactant. So if you calculate from A, since A is excess, if you calculate from A, your answer will be wrong. Since B is limiting here, so you have to calculate the amount of AB2 only from B. That means when you calculate the amount of product always you have to calculate from the limiting reactant. Yesterday I have not given the concept of limiting reactant. Why? Because yesterday the questions whatever we have done, only one reactant amount is given. That's why no need to find out the limiting reactant. But if the amount of both the reactants are given, then you have to find out who is limiting, and you have to do the calculation only from the limiting reactant, not from the excess reactant. So now suppose in this reaction the question is given like this: 5 gram of A reacts with 5 gram of B, how many gram of AB2 will produce? If you want to find out the amount of product, I mean amount of AB2, since amount of both the reactants are given, first time you have to find out who is limiting between this. A is limiting or B is limiting. First time you have to find out that. After determining that, you have to find out the amount of AB2 only from the limiting reactant, not from the excess reactant. As you know, this is 1 mole, this is 2 moles. I mean, if it is 5 gram, it should be 10 gram because the ratio is 1:2. If it is 5, it should be 10 according to the number of mole concept. But here it requires 10, given how much? 5. So it is given in less amount now. That's why B is the limiting reactant. Like this way, you have to find out the limiting reactant. Now I will give you some questions. From that questions you can find out who is limiting, who is excess. Now in this question, suppose it is given like this: 2 moles of A combines with 1 mole of B. A given 2 moles, B given 1 mole. Can you tell me who is limiting? As you know, 1 mole requires 2 mole. 2 moles requires how much? It requires 4 moles. If A is 2 mole, B should be 4 moles. But how much given? Only 1 mole given. I mean amount of B is less as required. That is why B should be the limiting reactant. And when you calculate the amount of product, you have to find out the amount of product only from B, not from A. If you calculate from A, it will be wrong. So that is why if the amount of both the reactants are given, then first time you have to find out the limiting reactant. But as you know, there is a law which is called law of conservation of mass. According to this law, the amount of reactants should be equal to the amount of product. I mean 2 plus 1, it should be 3. But it is not like that. There are some reactants which are present in excess amount. All the reactants do not involve in your chemical reaction. Originally, how much moles involved in chemical reaction, depending on that, you will get the amount of product. So this is about the concept of limiting reactant. In exam, the question will ask, what is limiting reactant? Find out the limiting reactant in the following. Like that the question will ask. So you have to know how to find out the limiting reactant. Thank you.